Asia's family moved into their new apartment in the middle of winter. The building, an old Soviet-era block from the 60s, creaked and groaned like it was alive, adjusting to its new occupants. Asia, a curious little girl of 6, was thrilled with her new room. Her parents had decorated it with pale pink wallpaper and shelves filled with her favorite toys, but what she loved most was her new doll. It was an antique, with porcelain skin, blue glass eyes, and a dress trimmed with lace. Her mother had given it to her as a moving-in gift, saying it once belonged to a distant aunt. The first few nights were peaceful, but on the third night, as Asia was playing with the doll, she felt an unusual chill in the air. She brushed it off, tucking the doll into bed before heading outside to play with friends. However, when she returned, she found the doll sitting at the small toy table, as if waiting for tea. Asia was puzzled. She was sure she'd left the doll in her bed. She called out to her mother, who only chuckled and said she must have moved it and forgotten. But Asia knew she hadn't. That night, she put the doll carefully in her toy box, making sure it was shut tight, and crawled into bed. She drifted off to sleep, but uneasiness crept into her dreams. In the middle of the night, she saw a young girl, no older than 7, standing before her in an old-fashioned pink dress with blue bows in her hair, clutching Asia's doll. The girl's smile was sweet yet distant, her eyes too wide, almost hollow. "Play with me," she whispered. Asia woke up in a cold sweat, her heart pounding. The doll was back on the bed, and on her pillow beside it lay a bright blue ribbon, just like the ones the girl wore in her hair. The next day, Asia couldn't shake the dream. She tried to tell her mother, who brushed it off, attributing it to Asia's active imagination. But the strange events continued. Objects would move around her room. Her favorite toys would sometimes be scattered in odd places, as if someone had been playing with them while she was away. Her mother insisted it was her own doing, but Asia knew better. One night, Asia dreamed again of the mysterious girl. She was standing in the doorway this time, her figure silhouetted in an eerie glow. "That's my doll," Asia shouted in the dream, reaching for it. "No," the girl whispered, her smile fading. "It's mine. It was always mine." Asia argued, demanding her doll back, but the girl only stepped closer, her eyes darkening. "If you want it," she said, "you'll have to play with me." Asia shook her head, backing away. "I don't want to. Please?" The girl's voice was pleading, almost sad. "No one plays with me anymore." In the dream, Asia turned and ran. When she awoke, her heart was racing, and her room was filled with an icy chill. The doll sat on her bed, staring at her with unblinking glass eyes, and the blue ribbon was now tied neatly around its neck. Asia's parents noticed her restlessness and strange behavior, but they attributed it to the stress of moving. Months went by, and the dreams continued, each one more vivid than the last. The girl in the pink dress appeared more frequently, and each time, she looked a little angrier, her eyes more hollow. One night, Asia had a different kind of dream. She saw the girl again, but this time, the girl was holding the hand of a toddler, a little girl with curls and chubby cheeks. The older girl looked at Asia with a smug expression and whispered, "You didn't want to play with me, but she will." Asia jolted awake, gasping for breath. She couldn't shake the image of the two girls, and a deep sense of dread settled over her. The following morning, her mother sat her down with a radiant smile and announced that she was pregnant. Asia's stomach twisted. She remembered the girl's words from her dream. Was this new friend meant for her unborn sibling? Months passed, and Asia's mother gave birth to a baby girl, whom they named Sasha. From the very beginning, Sasha was a restless child, often staring off at things that weren't there, her gaze fixed on invisible points in the air. When she turned 3, she began to talk about her friend, a girl in a pink dress with blue ribbons. Asia's blood ran cold. Sasha's imaginary friend became a regular topic of conversation, and her parents found it charming. But Asia knew better. She remembered her own encounters, the chilling dreams, and the eerie blue ribbon that appeared unexplainably in her room. She felt a deep responsibility to protect her younger sister, though she couldn't explain why. One night, Asya overheard Sasha talking in her room. She pressed her ear against the door and listened. "No, I don't want to play that game," Sasha whispered. There was a pause, and Asya could hear Sasha's breathing quicken. "Why are you angry?" "Please don't be angry." Asya's heart pounded. She opened the door just a crack, enough to see Sasha sitting on the floor, holding the old doll. Sasha turned, her eyes wide with fear, and said, "Asya, she's mad at me because I don't want to play anymore." The room filled with a suffocating cold, and Asya felt a familiar presence, something watching, something waiting. She grabbed Sasha and pulled her out of the room, shutting the door tightly behind them. They slept in the living room that night, and the next day, Asya insisted they needed help. Their parents, skeptical but worried for their daughters, finally agreed to have the apartment blessed. A priest came the following evening, performing a thorough blessing of the apartment. Asya watched him move from room to room, feeling a sense of relief as he muttered prayers and sprinkled holy water. When he entered her bedroom, he paused, his expression darkening. "There is something unsettled here," he murmured. He closed his eyes, gripping his cross tightly, and began to chant louder, the Latin words echoing off the walls. Suddenly, the air grew colder, and the door to Asya's toy closet creaked open. Inside, the doll lay on the floor, but something felt different. The priest picked it up, examining it closely. "This toy has seen much sadness," he said, looking at Asya's mother. "Who did it belong to?" Asya's mother explained that the doll had been passed down from her aunt, who had lived in this very apartment as a child. The priest nodded gravely and whispered, "Sometimes, children who pass too young leave a piece of themselves behind." That night, Asya had one final dream. The girl appeared one last time, but this time, she looked peaceful. She held the doll close, her face softening. "Thank you," she whispered. "You freed me." In the morning, Asya woke up to find the doll gone. They searched the apartment, but it was nowhere to be found. From that day on, Sasha never mentioned her friend again. The house felt lighter, as if a weight had lifted, and the cold spots and strange occurrences ceased. Years passed, and Asya and Sasha grew up. Occasionally, they would talk about the girl in the pink dress, wondering what had really happened. But one thing was certain, she had finally found peace. And although Asya would never admit it, sometimes, late at night, she could still feel a slight chill, as if a small hand was reaching out, just one last time, to say goodbye. Years passed after the last encounter with the girl in the pink dress, and life in the apartment returned to normal. Asya and Sasha rarely talked about those eerie childhood experiences, and when they did, it was almost in whispers, as if saying it out loud might bring the spirit back. Their family continued to live in the apartment, and gradually, the memories of the ghostly encounters faded. Asya was now in college, living on campus and studying art. She loved being away from home, the sense of independence freeing her from the strange heaviness that sometimes clung to her memories. But every time she visited home, she'd feel a subtle chill, like a cold draft creeping through the cracks. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was there, a lingering presence, reminding her that something had once happened here. One winter night, Asya decided to visit her family. Snow blanketed the city, and she arrived home feeling nostalgic and excited to see her sister and parents. However, as she stepped through the front door, she immediately sensed something was different. Her mother greeted her with a forced smile. "Oh, Asya, I'm so glad you're here," she said, but her voice had a tremor Asya hadn't heard before. Sasha, now a teenager, looked troubled. She was quiet and withdrawn, barely making eye contact with Asya. They sat together at dinner, but it was a somber meal, with an unspoken tension filling the room. Finally, Asya couldn't take it anymore. "Is everything all right? Did something happen?" Her mother looked away, and Sasha's eyes darted nervously towards the hallway that led to their bedrooms. Then, Sasha spoke in a low, fearful voice. "She's back." Asya's heart sank. She thought they had put all of this behind them. "What do you mean, she's back?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Sasha glanced at their mother, who looked down, avoiding their eyes. "A few weeks ago," Sasha whispered, I started seeing her again in my dreams. But it's not like before. She looks different. Different how? Asia's stomach churned. She's older. And she's not alone. Sasha's voice trembled. There's a boy with her. He's around my age, maybe a bit older. They stand together at the end of my bed, just staring at me. Asia shivered, her mind flashing back to her own encounters with the girl. Did she say anything to you? Sasha nodded. She whispers, I can't always understand her, but it's something about being forgotten and coming back. And the boy, he looks so angry. Asia felt a chill run down her spine. She'd thought the blessing had freed the spirit. Had they been wrong? Had something else been lurking in the apartment all along? Her mother finally spoke, her voice quivering. Maybe it's time we do something more. This can't go on, not again. The next day, Asia and her mother went to the local library to research the history of the apartment. They combed through old newspapers and documents, hoping to find something, anything, that would explain the strange occurrences. After hours of searching, they found a reference to a tragedy that had taken place in the building decades ago. A family had once lived in their apartment. They had 3 children, and all had died young, under mysterious circumstances. The records didn't provide many details, but there was a mention of the youngest girl, Lydia, and an older brother, Mikhail, who had disappeared shortly before the family's demise. The article suggested that Lydia and Mikhail might have met a tragic end, but the exact circumstances remained unknown. Asia's heart sank as she read the article. Could these be the spirits haunting their home? The girl in the pink dress, and now, the angry boy. Desperate, Asia and her mother sought out the priest who had blessed the apartment years ago. When they told him what was happening, he listened intently, his face grave. Sometimes, he said, a blessing can calm restless spirits, but if they are bound to the place by powerful emotions, fear, anger, despair, they may not be ready to leave. We must confront these spirits and understand what they want. Only then can they find peace. The priest agreed to return to the apartment with them, and that night, they prepared for what would be the most unsettling experience of their lives. The priest arrived just after sundown. He brought candles, holy water, and a worn leather book filled with prayers. Asia, her mother, and Sasha gathered around him, each of them holding on to the hope that this would finally bring peace. He began by blessing each room, sprinkling holy water on the walls, murmuring prayers under his breath. The apartment felt unnaturally cold, and as he moved from room to room, the chill deepened. When he reached Sasha's room, he paused, his eyes narrowing. This is where they linger, he said, his voice tense. They followed him into the room. The priest closed his eyes and began to recite a prayer, calling out to the spirits, inviting them to show themselves. As he prayed, the air grew heavy, oppressive, and a low whispering sound filled the room, like the rustling of dry leaves. And then they saw her. The girl in the pink dress stood in the corner, her eyes wide and sorrowful. But this time, she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a boy, tall and gaunt, with dark, angry eyes and a scowl etched across his face. His hand was clenched tightly around the girl's arm, as if he were holding her back. Asia felt a surge of dread. This was different from before. The boy's anger was palpable, radiating from him in waves. He glared at them with pure hatred, and the girl's face twisted in silent fear. Why do you haunt this place? The priest asked, his voice calm but commanding. The boy sneered, his lips barely moving. We were forgotten, left to rot here. No one remembers us. No one cared. The girl looked at Asia, her eyes pleading. He won't let me leave, she whispered. I just wanted to play. The boy tightened his grip on her arm, his expression hardening. No one leaves, he hissed. They left us to die. And now, they'll suffer. Asia's heart raced. She knew they had to do something to help the girl, but the boy's rage was a force she hadn't anticipated. The priest continued his prayers, his voice unwavering despite the hostility emanating from the boy. Asia, her mother, and Sasha held hands, standing together in a circle, drawing strength from each other. The boy's fury grew, and he took a step forward, his form flickering in the candlelight. "You think you can make us leave?" he snarled. "This place is ours. We belong here." "No," the priest replied firmly. "You belong in peace." He lifted the cross, holding it toward the boy. "In the name of God, I command you to release your sister and move on from this place." The boy shrieked, a sound filled with pain and rage, as if he were being torn apart. His grip on the girl loosened, and she looked at Asya with wide, desperate eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I just wanted a friend." And then, in a swirl of cold air, she faded, her form dissolving into the shadows. The boy fought, his expression twisting with fury, but as the priest continued his prayers, he, too, began to fade, his figure growing more and more insubstantial until, finally, he was gone. The room fell silent. The oppressive chill lifted, replaced by a gentle warmth that spread through the apartment. For the first time in years, the apartment felt calm. Asya, Sasha, and their mother hugged each other tightly, tears streaming down their faces. They knew the spirits had finally found peace. In the weeks that followed, Sasha's strange dreams ceased, and the eerie occurrences stopped. They still kept the doll, as a reminder of what had happened, but now, it felt like an ordinary toy, no longer a vessel for a lost soul. Sometimes, late at night, Asya would sit by the window and think about the girl in the pink dress and her tragic story. She'd wonder about the life the girl could have had, if only she hadn't been trapped in that dark, lonely apartment. And every now and then, she'd hear the faintest giggle, like a whisper on the wind, as if the girl were finally free to play, somewhere far beyond the confines of the old apartment walls.